Hello there guys and welcome back to the channel. Right, so in today's video we're going to be taking a look at newly buffed Howard the Duck, and before the buff actually went live I did have a ton of questions, namely all revolving that button mashing smashing mechanic, because I had a lot of doubts how realistic it is going to be. And the mechanic's actually not too bad, it's quite fun. And on top of that, you can always activate the auto bashing mechanic. So you can activate it before every single fight and can never ever have to like manually mash the buttons yourself. However, it is also important to note that when you do decide to activate the auto mashing mechanic, you're playing with the Howard the Duck at about 60% of his potential. That is about the kind of like the output there that you can get compared to what you can manually mash. So I personally will more than likely rarely activate that auto mashing mechanic. I would kind of feel, I don't know, I wouldn't feel great realizing that I'm not playing with a champion that's ramping up its damage as fast as it could, it's inflicting as many debuffs as it could. I would kind of feel that I'm playing with a lesser version of a champion. It's kind of as they always say, if you want something done right, do it yourself. Other than that, let's get into the fights themselves, and I'll explain as much as I have understood thus far. So the first fight I will showcase, first of all, the manual bashing mechanics in Realm of Legends against Winter Soldier, and explain some of his mechanics. As the fight starts, you want to already start tapping block. As you see this loading screen, you basically want to start tapping block because you start with 1 armor buff, but you can mash it up to 6 basically. After that, whenever you parry the opponent, are throwing a heavy attack or are throwing a special attack, you want to mash your buttons in order to basically double down on the effects. It's quite just as that simple. For instance, this fight I wanted to build up my damage before I actually start hitting Winter Soldier. So we can see that every time I parry, I gain a Fury, and then additional time I press block, again another Fury. And so in reality, you are able to get up to a very decent state in your ramp up very quickly. And it is not that he's only good for very long fights, because you can ramp up quite quick. So I do like that. We can see that at this point I already have 50 Furies, and I hit a lot harder than most champions would at this point in the fight. Also, armor breaks seem to be capped at 20 now, and you can inflict these power suppression debuffs, and you can inflict heal blocks on level 1, so you have access to a ton of buffs and to a ton of debuffs, which is fairly common these days. But we cannot ignore the fact that your armor breaks kind of provide you with safe haven from healing. If you can inflict 19 armor breaks even with 1 point in despair, you will completely shut down opponent's heal. No questions asked. Easy peasy, nothing to worry about. So Howard the Duck does not ever really need to throw that level 1. In fact, I would say level 1 is pretty pointless in most cases. With level 1 you can apply up to 5 heal blocks that each last 2.5 seconds if you multiply that times 5. So basically 12.5 second heal block. But why would you? Because armor breaks will destroy opponent's heal anyways. So the strategy typically is going to be either parry heavy or parry combos into level 2s for most part. And as we can see, you don't really have to pay too much attention to your ramp up. You can kind of do whatever you want and lose a couple of debuffs. It doesn't really matter whether you have 50 Furies or 47 Furies. And then there is no real problem to gain those additional debuffs back, because again, they expire 1 at a time, which is kind of cool, which is the quirky bit of utility that I have the highest hopes for future in regards to Howard the Duck. Now, these fights aren't perfect because they are very, very early attempts, and I'm still trying to get used to these whole mechanics. But overall, even though Howard the Duck unquestionably, undoubtedly has lost a lot of max damage potential, he used to be able to hit a lot harder. Right now, to access the damage, it's much, much quicker and much, much easier and much more realistic. It's also much, much quicker and realistic to maintain it. So I personally do find him more enjoyable to play, and also the quicker ramp up makes him more realistic option for a regular standard fight. Now for the next fight, I'm going to be activating the auto mashing mechanic. So keep in mind, in previous fight, for instance, I was able to mash myself up to 6 armor up buffs You start with 1 and then mashed 5 additional ones. In this case, I only fight with 4 armor buffs. So I am automatically set to take more chip damage, more parry damage, things like that. Why? Because I let computer do the duck's job. Anyways, so we can immediately see where auto mashing is helpful, but also not allowing you to access max potential. The ramp up is slower. You're likely going to start with less armor up buffs, therefore you will take more block damage, and your effects, well, not going to be as potent. Eventually, you're still going to get to that about the same place where you want to go, but the thing is, in most of the fights where you play Howard the Duck, you're probably not going to get to 50 buffs, even if you're doing it yourself. So having slower ramp up effectively means having less damage. It's kind of like the lazy way. Still, some people will probably be better off doing that. I personally will definitely go with manual mashing. It just will require some getting used to. That I'm still not great at, but I'm sure it's not going to be that difficult. Overall, we can see that the Ducky is definitely capable of putting in some work. For a rank 4 5-star with class disadvantage, I think he's doing decent enough job, don't you? We can see some decent numbers, 12k crits there. There was like some 6k crit in the middle of the multi-hit special attack, 4k light non-crits, you know, a whole bunch of hits on the heavy attacks that also all do decent damage, 10k medium crit, why not? All of these numbers aren't bad at all. They're not as great as they used to be. That does leave a bit of a sour taste in the mouth. Why did they have to nerf that max damage potential so much? Don't quite like it, especially with the design philosophy of this guy being suitable for mid to long range fights anyways. But it is what it is. And if I have to look at Howard the Duck the way he's in game right now compared to the way he was in the game before, I do think that a lot more people will end up using Howard the Duck because A, it's fun, B, it's much more realistic and it's quicker to actually ramp him up. And he does have some additional uses that he didn't before. Now, he has lost some piece of utility as well, unquestionably. For instance, it is an absolute must that you have to be able to parry stun the opponents. You have to be able to drop your heavy attacks. That's very, very imperative. But, for example, right now, he's a very solid choice for tech nodes in Cavalier quests on both of the rotations. Because the first tech node required champions to have armor buffs, which Howard the Duck does, and plenty of them. And the second node basically requires you to heal block the opponents or armor break them. And Howard the Duck has armor break for days. We can see that opponents will spend entire fights heal blocked in Cavalier event difficulty quest. In addition to that, you do end up generating those furies as quickly as any champion ever will be able to. And with the increased damage output and his damage ramp up, it's quite awesome for these things. Like, you can legit bring in a rank 4 5-star Howard the Duck and clear a lot of mutant KVQ. And he perhaps was decent for it before as well, but I do think he's a lot better now for it. So that's an immediate upside. Considering I really just know the one person out of thousands of people who I personally talk to daily that actually use Howard the Duck, I do think that the buff will help this guy get used by more people. Now, the discussion there is very tricky, and there is no easy way how to approach whether he should have been buffed in a way that he was, or he shouldn't have, or whether you side with Swede, or whether you side with Kabam, let's say. I don't know what is the right answer there. But selfishly, for me personally, Howard the Duck now is definitely a better champion for me on for the things I would want to use him potentially. Now, realistically, I'm not going to take him to rank 5, and he's not going to be the top tech champ in my opinion, but I do think he's a very, very solid middle of the field option now. That's actually very, very fun to play, and I might bring into the questing team just because he's fun. And sometimes that's quite enough. It's kind of like Squirrel Girl. Don't think there's any person who dislikes playing with Squirrel Girl. It's just that she's not that great. There are better skill options to rank now. Falcon's better, Maulman's better, Nick Fury's better, Aegon's better. Whole bunch of champions are better than Squirrel Girl. Squirrel Girl is, however, a perfectly fine, fun champion, which is kind of the way that I look at Howard the Duck now. So these numbers in KVQ obviously are inflated, keep that in mind. But before I finish the video, I do want to show him in some of the Act 6 fights. So this is like 616, I believe. And obviously Howard the Duck, just like before, is still a very, very solid Havoc counter, which is kind of cool. And again, I will be making some mistakes in these fights for sure, but I did want to kind of like bring a rank 4 5-star into Act 6, which is kind of like more or less appropriate power level. And he does obviously take some ramp up. There's no question there. He doesn't start with insane big numbers. You need to do some button mashing. And I'm playing without the auto button mashing because, again, I do find this to be more potent. And yeah, before long though, he will start dealing quite decent damage here. Because I'm just trying to mash up quickly. Now, is he the best option for this fight? Obviously not. But ain't the worst either. Right, so I'm at about 42 Furies. And I can drop my special attack. Some decent 6k crits in a row there. And that Moon Knight's health is, well, it's chopped down significantly at this point. Again, 20 armor breaks, 48 Furies, no problem there. I think I need to drop a level 1 at some point here. So 8k crit, 9k non-crit. It's not bad. I quite like it. 14k crit to finish off the fight. And then the last fight obviously is going to be against Havoc. Now it's going to be quite messy, but the same idea applies. Just slowly ramping up, getting my armor breaks. Doesn't matter if he detonates because I always have armor ups. I actually don't have willpower. With willpower I would have healed all the way back up. But yeah, still nothing too tragic, and that Havoc is basically dead at this point. Like a couple more hits, and it was like, what, 93 hits. So he's not going to be the quickest killer, but his buff turned out better than I thought it would. I think the numbers are quite good. I don't think they're out of this world, but for as how quickly you can ramp him up, I do like to see some of his numbers. Anyways, that is about it. Let me know what you guys think about Howard the Duck. I personally do like the buff. Kind of want to play about with him. Found it quite fun. And sometimes it's worth remembering that this is game and fun actually matters. And from a champion that, for me, meant absolutely nothing and that I never used for anything, to get a champion that I will occasionally use for fun, it's good enough. But again, let me know what are your thoughts about the buff. Do you like him now? And what are your plans regarding this little duck? All that being said, I'm going to catch you guys soon. See ya. Hello there guys, and welcome back to the channel. So we have all the information about